right. So I will take it from the top, as they say. Just a humanitarian update on Ukraine. Our colleagues, humanitarian colleagues, are welcoming the news that Russian Federation and Ukraine have agreed to facilitate safe passage for civilians out of conflict areas, where millions of people urgently need safe passage and life-saving humanitarian assistance and protection. We look to both sides to ensure the passage is organized in a manner that allows for safety, dignity, and protection of civilians. Humanitarian organizations stand ready to work with the parties to protect and care for civilians, whether they chose to stay or leave the concerned area. We stress that humanitarian organizations should have safe, unhindered, and sustained access to all those areas. And in recent days, our humanitarian colleagues are also reporting that many cities in Ukraine have experienced relentless shelling that has caused significant damage to crucial infrastructure and further restricted access to vital services. Critical supplies, including food, medicine, basic hygiene, are becoming increasingly scarce in the hardest hit areas, not to mention that cash reserves are dwindling. Their empty ATMs and money transfer services have been greatly curtailed. All of that has, of course, impacted people's ability to purchase goods, even when markets are functioning and accessible. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, her office reports that from the 24th of February to midnight last night on March 3rd, 1,006 civilians have been reported as casualties in Ukraine, and that includes 331 deaths. The human cost is likely to get much higher. For its part, UNHCR says that now more than 1.2 million people have crossed international borders. Regarding refugee numbers, I just want to flag to you that UNHCR has great statistics that they keep up to date on their operational data portal, which was activated this week, and I think IOM has a similar portal, so I would urge you to look for updated numbers on there continuously. Also, our humanitarian partners in Ukraine are continuing to provide assistance in areas where security permits, including the East, where local NGOs have provided food, household items, and shelter materials. UN agencies and humanitarian partners are setting up temporary shelters for people displaced from Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv oblasts, and providing critical medical equipment and supplies, including wound kits, to help local health services treat people with conflict-related injuries. The World Health Organization said that the first WHO cargo shipment with emergency supplies arrived in Warsaw and is now moving towards the border and will cross soon into Ukraine. WHO is assessing the needs at both Polish and Ukrainian sides. For its part, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization said it's planning to scale up assistance in all impacted areas through an interagency work. A little bit more on the World Food Program. David Beasley, the executive director of World Food Program, is currently on the Polish side of the Polish-Ukraine border. He warned that bullets and bombs in Ukraine could take the global hunger crisis to levels beyond anything we've seen before. He said that in a year when the world is already facing unprecedented levels of hunger, it's tragic to see hunger raising its head, which has long been the breadbasket of Europe. WFP noted that the Russian Federation and Ukraine are responsible for 29% of the global wheat trade, and that any serious disruption of production and exports from the region could push food prices beyond their current 10-year highs. Mr. Beasley warned that it is not just a crisis inside Ukraine. This is going to impact supply chains and particularly the cost of food. Potentially price rises could raise WFP's operational costs by anywhere from $60 to $75 million more per month. And that means more people going to bed hungry. Just to give you an example, we report monthly of the FAO's World Price Index. And just for February, so before the bulk of the fighting had started, FAO tells us that the world food prices went up in February in an all-time high, led by vegetable oils and dairy products. FAO price index was up 3.9% from January, 24.1% above its levels a year earlier. FAO noted that the food price index measures average price over the month, so the February readings only partly incorporates market effects stemming from the conflict in Ukraine. And I'm sure you also this morning Members of the Security Council held an open meeting on Ukraine. Briefing council members was the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, who said the Secretary General is gravely concerned by the escalating fighting throughout Ukraine. Ms. DiCarlo said the Secretary General has been following with great alarm the reports of heavy fighting around the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. And the Secretary General wants to make it very clear that nuclear plants should never, ever be targeted in military operations. She stressed that military operations around the nuclear site and other critical civilian infrastructure are not only unacceptable, but highly irresponsible and also contrary to international humanitarian law. Ms. DiCarlo emphasized that every effort should be taken to avoid a catastrophic nuclear incident and added the Secretary General welcomes the statement and actions by the International Atomic Energy Agency on this issue and is ready to assist however we can. She underscored that urgent and safe passage should be granted to IAEA personnel should they need to travel to Ukraine to work with regulators. And you also heard from the Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Mariano Grossi. Just to note on a sad note on Pakistan, the Secretary General strongly condemns the horrific attack reportedly killing at least 30 people and injuring over 50 others in a blast at a Shiite mosque in Peshawar today. In a tweet, he said that houses of worship should be havens, not targets. He extends his condolences to the families of the victims and to the government of Pakistan and wishes a speedy and full recovery to those who were injured. Those responsible for the attack must be held accountable. We also have a statement from the resident coordinator a UN resident coordinator in Pakistan. Just want to flag that on Sunday afternoon, the Deputy Secretary General will travel to San Jose in Costa Rica to attend the Forum of Countries of Latin America and the Caribbean on Sustainable Development. She will also meet with the UN regional directors and resident coordinators in the region and other stakeholders to discuss strategies, programs that can help countries accelerate progress towards the SDGs. She'll participate in a Women's Day celebration on March 8th with national authorities and young women in public schools of San Jose. She'll be back in New York on Tuesday. Want to flag an appeal for Ethiopia, which is another tremendous humanitarian crisis, as you know. Our friends at UNHCR are appealing for $205 million to deliver life-saving assistance and protection to over 1.6 million men, women, and children displaced due to the conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia. Of the $205 million, 117 will support the needs of Ethiopians internally displaced people and Eritrean refugees in the Afar, Amhara, and Tigray regions of the country, while 72 million will help us support Ethiopian refugees in Sudan. 16 million will be used for preparedness as part of the contingency measures for any potential influx into neighboring countries, notably Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, and South Sudan. Last night, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Libya sent letters to the leadership of both the House of Representatives and the High Council of State, inviting them to nominate 6 delegates to each chamber to form a joint committee dedicated to developing a consensual constitutional basis. She said the joint committee should convene on 15 March under the auspices of the UN to work for a 2-week period to achieve this goal. She awaits the Chamber's speedy responses to this invitation. Ms. Williams once more highlighted the fundamental importance of preserving security and stability and refraining from all acts of escalation, intimidation, kidnapping, provocation, and violence. The solution to Libya's crisis does not lie in forming rival administrations and perennial transitions, she said. And Burkina Faso, a quick note, said that along with our humanitarian partners, we launched the 2022 Humanitarian Appeal Response Plan. It seeks $591 million to provide humanitarian assistance to 3 million vulnerable people. During the last lean season, between June and August last year, close to 3 million people were severely food insecure. Their plight was aggravated by conflict vulnerability, climate change, the impact of pandemic. The outlook for this year indicates the situation is likely to get worse. Despite insecurity and access constraints, aid workers and organizations have stayed and are delivering. Last year, the UN and its partners reached 2.5 million people with 43%. That's less than half of the $607 million required. And in Malawi, we launched a 3-month flash appeal to provide vital assistance to 542,000 people affected by Tropical Storm Anna, which hit the country late in January. The appeal seeks $29.4 million, focuses on the 6 hardest hit districts, where an estimated 680,000 people are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. The flash appeal, together with 44 partners, includes 10 UN agencies and complements the government of Malawi's own relief efforts. A quick COVID update for you, this time from Mexico, where over 18 million doses of vaccines landed this week through COVAX, with procurement and logistical support from the Pan American Health Organization. This complements Mexico's bilateral agreements to purchase more vaccines. With the arrival of this latest batch, the country has received 24.6 million doses. That's nearly half of those doses contracted through COVAX to support the vaccination of 20% target to support the vaccination of the 20% target population. That's 26 million people almost. Costa Rica received 200,000 doses thanks to donations from France through COVAX, and we say thank you. I just want to provide an update on something I updated you earlier this week about documents related to the membership of the Russian Federation in the United Nations. And I think I was asked, I think by you, Alan, about this. And I think I said at the time that the Office of Legal Affairs had undertaken a review of its relevant files. I was informed this morning that the search is continuing through the paper-based files and not so much a non-digitized file, that some related documents have been found, including an interoffice memo dated 19 December 1991. It has been declassified, and I can share it with you if you're interested. The interoffice memo does not in any way alter the Secretariat's position, which is that in accordance with the UN Charter, the question of UN membership is the responsibility of member states, and a copy of that document has been provided to the permanent mission of Ukraine, as they had so asked. I want to end on a happy note. I want to say thank you to our very good friends in Prague and in Rome who have paid up their budget dues in full. I don't know how to say thank you in Czech, but I do know how to say grazie. So that brings us up to 67. Benno.
Thank you. Russian media is reporting that the defense minister was talking with the Secretary General. Can you confirm that? What did they talk about?
I can indeed confirm that to you. The Secretary General spoke to Defense Minister Shoigu early this morning. They discussed liaison mechanisms to guarantee the safe evacuation of civilians trapped by the conflict, and coordination mechanisms to deliver humanitarian aid to all those who need it throughout Ukraine.
And I would have a second question. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham said or appealed to Russians inside Russia to take out Putin, to kill Putin. Do you have a comment on that?
No particular comment, except to say that I think in order to find an end to this conflict, it's important to avoid rhetoric from any side that would make things more complicated. Pamela.
Thank you. One narrow question, one big one. On the referral by the ICC prosecutor based on a few dozen, more than 3 dozen countries, of an investigation into war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide since 2014, including today, of Ukraine. Where does the Secretary General stand, and does he support a war crimes investigation beginning, since sometimes he can weigh in on these?
The work of the International Criminal Court is independent from us, as you
yes,
know.
Of course,
let me just finish. We don't comment on their operations. That's what I can tell you.
And does the Secretary General support, in theory, any kind of war crimes?
The International Criminal Court is an important and critical institution to the UN system, but the prosecutor is separate from us.
All right, and the bigger picture question is, there's been a lot of activity here on the Ukraine crisis. How would you describe what the UN can do in this situation?
Well, what we can do is what we are doing, which is moving humanitarian goods in, upgrading our kind of infrastructure within Ukraine to ensure that we can reach those who are most at risk. That, of course, also depends on the coordination with the Russian Federation, with the Ukraine government, and I say the lines of communications have been good, and we very much appreciate that. So I think it's also important to understand that there are different constituent parts of this organization. There's the legislative bodies, General Assembly, Security Council, but this is what the UN's humanitarian architecture was designed to do. We are on one hand pushing for diplomacy, pushing for a stop to the fighting, but until that happens, we are there with the Ukrainian people to try to help them best we can. Celia, and then Betul.
Sorry. It's okay. The Ukrainian conflict has shown that there is a huge division between the African and the rest of the world. Is the Secretary General aware of that? Because it's really, it's like I've never seen that before.
Well, look, I think it's a good question for an analysis by reporters and experts. What I can tell you is that there is rightfully a lot of focus on what is going on in Ukraine because of the humanitarian consequences, because of the geopolitical consequences. And I think just, the example from WFP was a very good one. It shows the impact of the fighting will have on our primary food agency, on their ability to deliver food, which will have an impact throughout the world. What is also important is to remember that there are other conflicts and millions of other people who are suffering because of conflict, and we cannot forget them. And we have to be able to do multiple things at once. And that's what the UN system is doing under the leadership of the Secretary General. And that's why we keep also mentioning what is going on in Yemen, what is going on in Ethiopia, because we all know the media interest is somewhere, the global media interest, which is normal, but it is also our responsibility in terms of Secretary General to ensure that we don't forget what is going on in the rest of the world. Betul.
Thank you, Steph. We are seeing media reports that Russian citizens who are protesting against the war are being detained. Does the UN know how many Russians have been detained so far? And has the UN raised this issue with the Russian officials? And my second question is the Secretary General concerned about a nuclear war?
Look, what the Secretary General is concerned about is ensuring that this conflict ends. I think he said himself that even the discussion of a nuclear conflict is inconceivable, that there is never an excuse for the use of nuclear weapons. On the issue of arrests, I mean, I would refer you to what the High Commissioner for Human Rights has said. She's expressed her concern. I'll say what we've said in any of these situations. People everywhere have a right to demonstrate peacefully, and the forces of law and order need to guarantee those rights and those people's rights and not detain them. Madame.
Okay. Humanitarian corridors. You say the communications are good, but have you tested that, and when will you?
Well, part of they're ongoing, right? We were able to relocate some of our staff from Kiev to Western Ukraine. That was done in close cooperation with both the Ukrainians and the Russian Federation to ensure that they knew where we were going, who we were. We will continue close coordination with the Ukrainians. We will also likely have some staff, UN staff within the Russian Ministry of Defense in Moscow to ensure deconfliction and coordination. So this will be an ongoing building process. I think as the conflict continues and as we we upgrade our delivery of humanitarian aid, that becomes even more important. We have systems that are set up differently, but the aim is the same, whether it's in Syria or in Yemen, where we have to be in touch with the parties to ensure the safety of humanitarian operations. Stefano, and then Ibtisam.
Thank you, Stéphane. I want to go back on when the Secretary General, before the war started, until a few weeks ago, he was thinking that he believed that the war was not going to happen. I'm asking, is thought, I mean, how did he base that? Because the Americans have been saying practically for 2 months that they had intelligence that was saying that there was a preparation of this invasion. So was he speaking about the Americans? The Biden government was alerting the Secretary General that when he was saying the war was not happening, they would say, no, we have actually intelligence that show us.
The Secretary General didn't really have access to any intelligence or facts beyond that what you've all have had. I mean, it's, as an aside, there's been an immense amount of information available on open source. You know, the Secretary General admitted that he was wrong. He wished he had been right. He's also one who believes that, you know, if you keep saying that the worst will happen, it increases the chances of the worst happening. So it was his personal analysis, one, frankly, that was shared, I think, with quite a few people and pundits and others.
And just to finish, because I start to think like maybe the Secretary General thought that this war was so crazy and dangerous that will not happen because it would really create a disaster. So no one would start a war like this. Now, and I come to the question, because actually the war started, because Putin gave the order to invade Ukraine, does the Secretary General think that the president of Russia in this moment, he's, delusional, or he's not well, or he thinks that there are interests there that maybe he didn't take in consideration? What is his take on this?
Secretary General does not engage in that kind of analysis. His focus on right now is trying to figure out how to increase the humanitarian aid we can get in and how to end this conflict. Did I say Ibtisam? I say Ibtisam, and then I'll go to Philippe.
Hi, thank you. I just want to go to the humanitarian situation, and as you know, the Security Council is members are debating a resolution. So my question to you is, not debating, they are consulting.
You could use whatever word you want to use, not me. Yeah.
So my question is actually for your work, how important that the Council adopt a humanitarian resolution, and that you have Russia on board. And if the Council doesn't adopt such a resolution, what does that mean for your work? Is it going to affect it, or?
Well, let me put it this way. We're working right now implementing our humanitarian work without a Security Council resolution, right? We're working with the Russians, we're working with the Ukrainians. We have the amazing generosity of those countries bordering Ukraine. That being said, and I've said this before, whenever we have the full backing of the Security Council behind us in whatever work we do, it increases our effectiveness. Philippe.
Thank you, Stéphane. There are today different decisions taken by Russia against different media. Facebook, BBC impacted. What is your reaction?
Look, I will give you the kind of just say what we've been saying globally is that we think more media is better than less media, that journalists need to work, people need to have access to information wherever they are. I'll go to the screen, then I'll come back to the room. Abdel Hamid, please.
Stéphane. I have 3 quick questions, so I will not take much of your time. First question, does the IAEA have any inspectors on ground near those nuclear facilities to verify what's going on there?
I do not believe they had. I would refer you to what the Director General said. I do not believe they have anyone on the ground, but you need to check with them. Your second question.
My second question. There are news reports say that some Ukrainian refugees had made it to Israel, and Israel decided to settle them in the occupied Palestinian territory in those illegal settlements. Can you verify that? And if that is true, something had to.
I have no information to that effect at this point.
And my last question, a little child in Hebron, Muhammad al-Jabari, has been shot by a settler in the stomach. He is in critical condition. Are you aware of this incident?
I am not, but it doesn't mean that our colleagues on the ground are not. Okay, Celia, and then we'll go back to Benno.
It seems that we have one man against the rest of the world. I guess we have not seen that since 1939, when we had Hitler. What can be done to stop like a third world war? Because it's really scary for the world.
I'm not going to jump back with you into historical analyses. That's your prerogative. What you need to do is to get as in any conflict, the only way this thing gets settled peacefully is by parties sitting down together and arriving at a diplomatic solution. And I think that's what everybody wants to see, and that's what the Secretary General wants to see as well. Benno and then Edward.
As you know, a Russian UN worker was expelled by the US, according to the US, because of espionage. Did you change any measures internally in the vetting process? Do you do background checks on other members of your staff right now? Did it change anything? What happened?
A couple of points. This person was scheduled to leave. This was a part of a U.S. decision based on the headquarters agreement. It put us in a very regrettable place. Everyone who works at the United Nations signs an oath and is expected to uphold the Charter, including, if I'm not mistaken, Article 99 of the Charter. We take people at their word. We do not focus on certain people, certain nationalities. This is an organization that represents the world. We hope that, and we expect that people who come and who work here uphold those values.
Does that mean you trust all the other staff members?
Well, I hope Secretary General trusts me, and there is the only way organizations can actually function is on the basis of trust and not on fear. Edward.
Yes, Stéphane. I believe no one have asked this question. In the past 1 week or so, I think there are a lot of sanctions, blockage on Russia, only except for military actions now, including just you mentioned RT, the media and companies. And I mean, do you think these kind of sanctions really would work?
Look, these are bilateral sanctions. I think our position on sanctions, as expressed a number of times, is that
It's bilateral?
those sanctions are.
Okay.
It's not. What I mean, they're not UN sanctions. They're
Okay.
from one country onto another country. That's what I mean by bilateral. We've always had the opinion that when sanctions are imposed, they should be targeted and done in a way that limits the pain of everyday people. That's been what we've been saying for years. I forgot a whole bunch of people on the screen, so I apologize. Abdel Iftikhar, and then Chris.
Thank you, Steph. The Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution calling for the Commission of Inquiry to investigate alleged human rights abuses by Russians in Ukraine. Any reactions, and what are the next steps in this process?
Well, I guess the next step is for the Human Rights Council to agree on who will lead that. I think that takes some time for them to come to an agreement. I will say what we say about every commission set up by the Human Rights Council. They are an important part of the human rights architecture, and we encourage every country to cooperate with those sorts of commissions. Chris.
Hi, Stéphane. At the Security Council emergency session this morning, the Ukrainian ambassador insisted that all member states use the language in the resolution that was passed a couple days ago, deploring Russia's aggression against Ukraine and to stop ambiguities in language. And I'm wondering what the Secretary General's position is on this and what his feelings are that we are hearing such a wildly different interpretation of this conflict from the Russian ambassador. And you guys keep talking about this path to peace and dialogue. How do you do that when there's such a divide between what is actually happening on the ground?
Well, how do you do that? You keep trying. You try to find different avenues to get to the goal that we want. That's what you do, and that's what we do in every conflict situation. What we don't do is to give up. On the I mean,
do you think the Secretary?
Say again.
Does the Secretary General believe that at least some common language should be used in describing the conflict in Ukraine?
We use the language that we use. We're not in the business of.
Does the Secretary General call it war?
The Secretary General. I mean, I would refer you to what he's been saying. We've called it the conflict, the fighting that's been going on. Everyone can use whatever language they wish to. I think our language has been rather descriptive and clear. Oscar.
Hi, Stéphane. Thank you so much. And humanitarian aid, Stéphane, what is the situation in the ground? And if the UN has any person on the ground to know exactly what's the situation again about the civilians who choose to stay and those who are looking for refuges in the subways, and even what's the situation with the people in the regions that have been already taken by the Russian military forces? Is there any information about what's the situation
Oscar,
with the humanitarian?
Oscar, with all due respect, I think I read out a very descriptive situation report at the beginning of the briefing, which was that things are not going well, that there is a lack of access to basic services, basic supplies, ATMs are down, there's no cash. So I think I have no more information than what I've already shared. There's also all the humanitarian work that's being done on the border, with Poland having taken, I think, the most refugees, but also Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, and others. And we're very grateful for those countries for what they're doing, and we're assisting them in any way we can as well. Celia, and then Stefano.
The Secretary General started his second mandate. In light of what is happening now, does he think sometimes that really should not have seek another mandate?
Well, we're all here. No, the Secretary General has no regrets at having signed up for a second, having asked for and been given a second mandate. Stefano, and then we'll go to Ms. Kubiak.
Yes, on the breaking news, read on the New York Times that Russia, apart of blocking Facebook, is threatened up to 15 years in prison for those who stray from the state narrative of the war in Ukraine. The question is, does the Secretary General think that Russia is a democracy or not?
I'm not going to get into this analysis at this point. We believe in people's basic... let me just answer. We believe in people's basic rights everywhere, the right to free expression, the right to demonstrate peacefully, the right to have access to information, and that goes for every country in the world.
And just a quick follow-up, because the war was described by the President of the United States and others as like a war against democracy. Does the Secretary General think that this is a good description?
We will let leaders engage in rhetoric. It's their right. Everybody has a right to speak. We will focus on two things. We will focus on the humanitarian situation, how to make it better for men, women, and children who are inside Ukraine. And we will focus on how to get the parties together to find a diplomatic solution. Punto basta. Également, Paulina, all yours.